time for the Gillette pressure rankings.
You put him under pressure.
For me, it was a self-imposed pressure.
Was I under pressure? No.
Yeah, they're under pressure. Everyone's under pressure.
OTB AM's pressure rankings with Gillette.
And the big pressure.
Nathan, you've done a couple of these pressure rankings, but you've got big boots to fill, big shoes, Owen Sheehan-sized shoes. So where are we starting?
Well, we're starting somewhere where Owen Sheehan himself may start. The Dublin attack. The pressure is going to be cranking up ahead of their bid for the Magnificent Seven in 2021 after Paul Mannion stepped away for the year once again. Paul Mannion, one of the most talented footballers in the country. Who'll ever forget the points he scored against the All-Ireland semi-final against Mayo last year? Off the left, off the right, he can do it all. One of the most graceful attacking players in the game. No county can surely cope with the loss of such a talent, on top of the experience of a Paddy Andrews and Michael Dara McCauley.
I think
he barely featured this year, and they still won the All-Ireland. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I do. Look, practice. We out here talking about practice, as Alan Iverson said. I do think the training sessions are hugely important, where you drive the standards and you hone and you sharpen things. And if Paul Mannion wasn't starting, then everybody in that forward line felt nervous that 15 minutes in, if they weren't playing well, they were going to get the hook, because Mannion's there and ready to go, and obviously did have an impact off the bench. I think him gone. I think Paddy Andrews gone. I think that all of that will certainly make you, if you're Kerry or Tyrone, or maybe if you're Mayo, I'm not sure, we'll get to them in a second, feel like, okay, they're human again. Is that all it needs, just for them to be human again?
But again, none of those players started the All-Ireland final this year. So as brilliant as they were and as crucial as they are clearly behind the scenes into keeping this Dublin team ticking over, and their biggest test for the vast majority of the championship being those training games, maybe not being quite what it was, you're still not losing anything from that first 15. And maybe there's more retirements to come, but there's probably more retirements to come from every county. So it's not as if every team, maybe with the exception of Tyrone, who have players coming back, and even the talk of Colm Cavanagh coming out of retirement for another season, maybe they are going to be in a position of real strength. But yeah, you're always going to be at a loss of Paul Mannion, but Dublin have just this conveyor belt of replacements. So I think they'll be okay. All
right, next on our list is the Mayo defence.
The Mayo defence, another retirement, and, well, the most heartbreaking one as a Ballyhonus man so far. Keith Higgins has retired over the weekend. Just a stupendously talented sports person. Unquestionably one of Mayo's greatest ever players. 4 All-Stars. No Mayo man has won more. 8 Connacht titles. Young Footballer of the Year. And probably the biggest compliment is the esteem he was held in by his opponents, who were all coming out to pay tribute to him over the weekend. Gave us some of the greatest individual battles we've ever seen in those 2014 games against Kerry. And if you want to see what Keith Higgins was all about, watch back the last 5 minutes of the 2006 semi-final against Dublin. That's how long a career at the top level Keith Higgins had. We're going back 15 seasons. Last 5 minutes, this is the comeback game. Keith Higgins is the one who makes this typically lung-bursting run through the centre before eventually it goes to Kevin O'Neill and on to Kieran MacDonald to score that famous point with the outside of his boot. Mayo are in front, but then Dublin have a chance to equalise in injury time. Mark Vaughan hits the crossbar. Ball comes out to jail, just on the left of centre, swings the boot, and out of nowhere, this incredible block from Keith Higgins, both ends of the pitch. And he did that for 15 years solid for Mayo. And, as people in Ballyhonus will tell you, he's better hurler than the footballer. Won a Nicky Rackard Cup with Mayo. I don't think Ballyhonus had ever won a senior hurling title until Keith Higgins came along and the Higgins family came along, and they've won 13 since 2002. So he's only retiring from football, but don't be surprised to see him back in Croke Park in the green and red again in a hurling jersey.
Right. Look, it was one of the best sights of summer, him in full flow, like a unique running style, kind of a yappy and yet unbelievably fast. You wonder, like, what was his distance as an athlete? Would it have been 1500? Would it have been 800? Was he a 400-meter hurdler? Whatever it was.
Well, there was always a sense that he was sacrificing himself as well for the team, because he was the guy, because of his agility, his movement, that you put man-marking the opposition's best player. So Keith Higgins could have played in that half-back line, but he wasn't needed because Mayo had such a strong half-back line with Boyle and Vaughan and Keegan. They tried him at times playing as a centre-forward. In the 2013 final, I think he started wearing number 10. But generally, it was back in that cornerback position where when you are discussing best teams of the last 50 years from all counties, he is going to be right there in the mix for that cornerback spot. And watching back some of the clashes with James O'Donoghue in 2014, they brought the best out of each other. James O'Donoghue scored 2-6 in one of those games. I think 4 points in play, yet still it goes down as one of Keith Higgins' best ever games because O'Donoghue was just unplayable. The amount of blocks that he got in, they just bashed each other game after game. So, yeah, I think as an athlete, he was up there. And that's shown from the fact he could do it over 2 sports. I remember as a kid, he was a great soccer player as well. So he had it all. And we're now into, 5-6 retirements for Mayo. You'd expect that's it. Maybe Colin Boyle is the only one left. But I think the fact he's had some injuries, you'd hope that he wants to go back and give it one last go. But it's just a huge, huge loss of experience.
Yeah, that Mayo team is over. It's a new Mayo team. I know Killian is still going to be there, and I know Aidan O'Shea is still going to be there, but this is the next generation's team now. They'll be the leaders of that for a couple of years, but that team that went toe-to-toe with Dublin is essentially gone, and I think we're all sad about that. Next is Rory McIlroy. I put out the gif of Silvio Dante doing his just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. I thought I wasn't going to have to watch Rory McIlroy this year with any kind of more than a passing interest, that actually he'd kind of become somewhat irrelevant. Post-lockdown, his form had reached the point where it's like, I can safely not really watch this. McIlroy is not going to be that explosive. And then he had a seesaw weekend, and I sat down on Sunday morning for a couple of hours, and I picked the wrong time to sit down and watch this, because this Sunday was terrible.
Yeah, it was bang average. But the one thing you know with Rory is he generally starts the season well. There's an incredible statistic. In the last 14 years, he's finished in the top 5 in his first appearance of the season 13 times without winning any of them. So consistently, he emerges after a break in good form. And on Thursday, it looked absolutely effortless for him as he moved to the top of the leaderboard. But this is what's happened, McIlroy in Abu Dhabi. He struggled to maintain it. Everything seemed a little bit off yesterday. His driving was wild at times. His approach play was at the 16th where, he was 5 behind Tyrrell Hatton at this stage. But Hatton sends a drive miles left. Rory, the commentators are salivating at how far down the 16th fairway he's got it. And Hatton gets up and down for birdie. McIlroy misses the green from the middle of the fairway, misses the birdie putt, and suddenly it's done and dusted. So he was outgunned by a brilliant player and an emerging talent in Tyrrell Hatton, who's now above McIlroy in the world rankings. But this is what Rory does at the start of the season. There's always good form there. Look back to this time last year. He was the best player in the world in the 3 months before golf was stopped. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if he's in the exact same position heading into the Masters this year. He's going to play 7 of the next 8 weeks. He's back in America, in California, in Torrey Pines this week, which is the venue for this year's US Open. So I would expect McIlroy to win over the next couple of months. I don't think you would ever write off Rory McIlroy. I still think he is as explosive a golfer and as exciting a golfer when he's on form. And this time of the year, he loves the early part of the season. I've always felt it's all kind of irrelevant, though, in terms of the Masters, because he's come into it every which way. In form, out of form, playing a lot, not playing a lot, and it hasn't quite happened. So we will read a lot into what he does over the next couple of months. He's just got to turn up at Augusta and do it. And that's what his season's going to be judged on.
Yeah, look, it's going to be worth watching. I think that was my main takeaway from the weekend. So next is Jurgen Klopp, under pressure to turn things around or pressure to buy a defender.
Well, under pressure to buy a defender, and it's the club's owners who are going to be under pressure to buy a defender, because for all Liverpool's success in Premier League titles and Champions League titles and the rave reviews that Michael Edwards and FSG have got over the last couple of years, if they don't sign a defender, it is going to be seen as one of the biggest mistakes Liverpool have made in recent times, and going to come back to haunt them, and is going to leave a lot of ill feeling. Is it going to be absolutely 100% detrimental to their chances of winning the title? Not necessarily. If they can keep Joel Matip fit and available and playing once a week, they can turn this round. There were bright sparks yesterday where Mo Salah gets back, gets a couple of goals, still the top scorer in the Premier League this season. But I think a lot comes down to Thursday night. That game against Tottenham is huge. One more defeat and you'd feel they're gone. But actually beating Tottenham suddenly reignites your season. So this is a huge week for Jurgen Klopp, and it shows just how far Liverpool have fallen over the last week, that they could be beaten by Manchester United in the Cup and still find more positives than they have in the last 2 or 3 games.
This isn't... So, again, this goes back to the conversation that we've been having. Like, I understand the importance that one of the best defenders in the world has, but it did feel like they'd started the season slightly off from the high heights that they'd reached over the last couple of seasons, and that if everybody else was playing at the same level they were playing at for the last couple of seasons, then the loss of the centre-back wouldn't be such a big deal. But it's a collective... My argument is that it's a collective... This happens in teams where you reach a height and for whatever reason you come off that height.
Absolutely, and it happened Manchester City last season. Manchester City played for the previous 2 seasons as good a brand of football as we've ever seen in the Premier League. And then last season you're watching them and it's very similar to Liverpool. It seems a bit slow, it's pedestrian, it's predictable, and you're wondering, how can this be the same group of players? But again, if there's a 5% dip across everybody, it's suddenly a huge difference in the style of play. But I do think, again, without repeating myself on Virgil van Dijk, you've also lost Fabinho because you've lost Virgil van Dijk, because he's having to play at centre-back instead of in the centre of midfield, where he was so good last season.
They did sign Thiago to counteract that, and obviously he's been out for a good while, but he's back. And, like, that's your job as the manager, is to accept that at some point there is going to be a shortness and a thinness in your squad, and they didn't get the Dejan Lovren replacement, and they thought they were going to be okay with that. And look, I don't think it's arrogance on Klopp's part at all. I think it's probably that they decided that they were going to take that risk, that this wasn't going to happen, and if it did happen, they'd have Fabinho and they'd be okay because they had enough depth in midfield. And you know, we keep talking about how the transfers have all worked out, but like Shaqiri and Minamino and all those guys who are in that squad actually haven't had the impact that Diego Jota has had. Now, they didn't cost as much, so maybe they're not supposed to, but it's not a perfect scenario. It's what we thought was a really, really deep squad actually isn't a really deep squad.
No, and I was never convinced it was a very deep squad because he doesn't always trust those players. Like Divock Origi has had flashes. He will live long for his goals in the Champions League final and semi-final and in the Merseyside derby, but hasn't put together a consistent run of games and have never really looked to replace him, have never got the player in. Minamino's come in. You're right. Last time we saw Minamino against Crystal Palace, he was exceptional. They won 7-0, but for some reason hasn't been trusted since. Shaqiri doesn't play a game for a year. He gets thrown in at the deep end against Manchester United. So he has the players that he knows can do the job for him week in, week out. He'll play them again and again, and maybe that is part of it as well. A little bit of fatigue creeping in for the likes of Gini Wijnaldum, who's played practically every minute since the start of the season, because he doesn't trust an Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain to come in for a couple of days games and give Wijnaldum a break. So there's not just one thing, there's many different things, but I still think if Van Dijk was there, this complete collapse wouldn't have happened.
Okay, the last one was supposed to be Munster, but is that what we're actually going to do? Because we're going to talk with Alan Quinlan with Munster in just a moment. Is that, are we doing something different here, Nathan?
We're doing something different because this was a momentous weekend for the OTB AM team, because our producer, Tommy Rooney, he hit the big time. He hit the jackpot on Twitter. He got a reply from Gary Lineker.
Listen to this snivelling tweet. Interesting to hear Bruno Fernandes in conversation with Gary Lineker. Make sure you tag the celebrity that you want to retweet you. Speaks incredibly well, forthright about MUFC problems, and cites passion of fans and adrenaline of playing in front of packed stadiums as a key factor in moving to the Premier League. Only one exclamation mark. Tommy had somebody edit this. Best of Bruno yet to come. Hashtag FA Cup. Tommy did everything correct here. Everything. The right hashtag for the FA Cup for the TV station that Lineker's working with. Obsequiousness beyond belief, and praise, endless praise. And then look, Gary Lineker straight away. Agreed. Very impressive on and off the field. Tommy Rooney, you're a celebrity. He's not there.
He's not there. Tommy. He's probably still replying. His notifications are just off the chart. He probably can't switch his phone on for long enough, because the batteries just run down from the amount of replies from such an intelligent comment that he put there to Gary Lineker. 7.8 million followers for Gary Lineker. So the question we got to ask is, what's next? Where does Tommy go next? I'm suspecting his next target is going to be Jake Humphreys. Tommy, I suspect, is a listener to the High Performance podcast. And maybe what he might do is try and take it to another level where he will compliment Jake Humphreys on his High Performance podcast. And as a high performer himself, this is something that fascinates him. And maybe at Andy McEntee could recognise this fact at some stage. And there could be a real world benefit to Tommy's tweets.
Yeah. I mean, look, I can't believe Andy McEntee hasn't just put him on the team at this stage. just to stop all
for the
those...
public humiliation.
Yeah.
It happens. Stick him in a league game. It doesn't matter. He doesn't score. He gets hauled off after 20 minutes and it's done.
Yeah, exactly. And then he's got a story to talk about. And also just to stop those late night phone calls from the block numbers. It's 6 minutes past 9. We're going to take a quick break. That's your Gillette Pressure Rankings this week. We'll be back with Alan Quinlan.